November 19th, 1983. 6:47 p.m. The wind ripped through the intersection of West 63rd Street and South Kedzie Avenue on Chicago's southwest side with a ferocity that made the traffic signals sway on their cables. Temperature had dropped to 21 degrees Fahrenheit by early evening, and a thin glaze of black ice crept across the asphalt like something alive. The streetlights along Marquette Park's perimeter buzzed with that particular amber sodium glow that turned falling snow into swarms of golden insects. The air tasted of iron and diesel exhaust. Somewhere on the block, a radiator hissed its complaint through a cracked apartment window, and the L train on the Orange Line rumbled past 3 blocks north, its rhythm as steady and indifferent as a metronome. Inside Dalton's Diner at 3418 West 63rd Street, our 23-year-old Renata Marie Kowalski sat in the third booth from the door, the one nearest the jukebox that hadn't worked since August. She wore a navy blue pea coat over a cream-colored cable knit sweater, her chestnut hair pulled into a loose braid that fell over her left shoulder. A half-eaten grilled cheese sandwich and a cup of black coffee sat before her, alongside an open spiral-bound notebook filled with her tight, looping handwriting. Renata was a graduate student in social work at Loyola University Chicago, and she was preparing case notes for her Monday practicum at the Cook County Juvenile Detention Center, where she spent 12 hours a week counseling teenagers who had been failed by every system designed to protect them. The diner's owner, 61-year-old Casimir Kaz Dalton, later recalled that Renata looked up from her notebook around 6:50 p.m. and smiled at him as he refilled her coffee. So she had this way about her, he would tell police 3 days later, his voice breaking. Like the whole world was worth paying attention to. She asked me how my knee was doing. My knee. Girl had 100 things on her mind, and she asked about my knee. At approximately 7:15 p.m., Renata gathered her notebook, zipped her coat to the chin, and left Dalton's Diner. She turned left, heading south on Kedzie toward her apartment at 6512 South Kedzie Avenue, a 7-minute walk she had made hundreds of times. The snow was falling harder now, thick, wet flakes that clung to eyelashes and accumulated on the shoulders of parked cars. The sidewalk was empty. Marquette Park lay dark and silent to her east, its bare oak trees skeletal against the amber sky. Renata Marie Kowalski never arrived home. Her roommate, Linda Jansen, aged 24, waited until midnight before calling Renata's parents. By dawn, the Kowalski family was standing in the lobby of the Chicago Police Department's 8th District Station at 3420 West 63rd Street, just 2 doors down from the diner where their daughter had last been seen alive. By Tuesday, Renata's face was on every telephone pole in Chicago lawn. By the following spring, her name had become synonymous with a question that would go unanswered for nearly 4 decades. What happened in those 7 minutes between Dalton's Diner and home? Well, before we dive into this haunting story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love cases solved after decades, don't forget to hit subscribe to stay updated on more stories. In 1983, Chicago Lawn was a neighborhood caught between identities. Situated on the city's southwest side, bordered by Marquette Park to the north and the Belt Railway corridor to the south, it was a working-class enclave of Poles, Lithuanians, and Irish families who had planted roots in its brick bungalows and 2 flat apartment buildings decades earlier. The neighborhood's commercial spine ran along 63rd Street, a stretch of bakeries, hardware stores, taverns, and diners where everybody knew your last name and most could guess your parish. St. Nicholas of Tollentine Catholic Church anchored the western end. Our Lady of the Snows held the east. Between them lay a community that prided itself on hard work, Friday fish fries, and an unshakable conviction that neighbors looked out for one another. But change was pressing at the borders. white flight had accelerated throughout the late 1970s. Factories along the Sanitary and Ship Canal were shuttering, and unemployment was climbing toward 11% citywide. The neighborhood's demographics were shifting, and with that shift came tension. Sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted. Marquette Park had been the site of open housing marches in 1976 that drew counter-protesters by the thousands. The scars from that era hadn't healed. They had merely been paved over with a brittle civility that could crack at any provocation. This was the world Renata Marie Kowalski inhabited, and she inhabited it with a stubborn, wide-eyed optimism that sometimes exasperated and always inspired the people around her. Born on March 7th, 1960, at Holy Cross Hospital on the near south side, Renata was the second of 4 children born to Stanislaw Stan Kowalski, age 51, a tool and die maker at the Western Electric Hawthorne Works, and his wife, Dorota Dottie Kowalski, née Wojcik, age 48, a homemaker who supplemented the family income by taking in alterations. Renata's older brother, Tomasz Tommy Kowalski, was 25 at the time of her disappearance and worked as a pipe fitter for the city. Her younger siblings, twin sisters Anna and Katarzyna Kasia Kowalski, were 19 and freshmen at the University of Illinois at Chicago. The Kowalski family lived at 6,438 South Keeler Avenue, a tidy red brick bungalow with a statue of the Virgin Mary in the front garden and a chain-link fence Stan had installed himself in 1972. Renata had grown up sharing a bedroom with the twins in the finished attic, where she papered the sloped ceiling with postcards from places she intended to visit: Prague, Krakow, San Francisco, Patagonia. She was a voracious reader who devoured Studs Terkel and Flannery O'Connor with equal fervor. She played the clarinet badly and enthusiastically. She had a scar on her left knee from a bicycle accident at age 9 and a habit of humming Chopin nocturnes when she was nervous. Physically, Renata was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed approximately 130 pounds. She had medium brown hair that fell to the middle of her back, hazel eyes that shifted between green and gold depending on the light, a spattering of freckles across her nose, and a slightly crooked front tooth she'd refused to have corrected because, as she told her mother, "It gives my face character." On the evening she disappeared, she was wearing a navy pea coat, a cream cable knit sweater, dark wash Levi's jeans, and brown leather ankle boots with a low heel. She carried a tan canvas messenger bag containing her spiral notebook, 2 textbooks, a wallet with $14, her Loyola student ID, and a set of keys on a brass keychain shaped like the Eiffel Tower. By the autumn of 1983, Renata was in her second year of the Master of Social Work program at Loyola's Water Tower campus. She had moved out of the family bungalow the previous June into a second-floor apartment at 6512 South Kedzie Avenue, which she shared with Linda Jansen, a fellow graduate student. The apartment was a 4-room walk-up above a vacuum repair shop. The rent was $310 a month, split evenly. Renata paid her share with a combination of a teaching assistantship, a small scholarship, and weekend shifts at a used bookstore on Western Avenue called Second Story Books. On the morning of November 19th, 1983, a Saturday, Renata woke at 7:30 a.m. She ate a bowl of oatmeal, reviewed her case notes, and took the Kedzie bus north to the Cook County Juvenile Detention Center at 1100 South Hamilton Avenue for a 4-hour practicum shift that began at 9 a.m. She left the facility at 1:15 p.m., stopped briefly at the Harold Washington Library downtown to return 2 overdue books, and arrived back in the neighborhood around 4 p.m. She stopped at Dalton's Diner at approximately 5:30 p.m., ordered her usual grilled cheese and coffee, and settled into her booth to work. It was, by every measure, almost an ordinary day. The kind of day that doesn't announce itself as the last. The timeline, as detectives would later reconstruct it, was punishingly precise and maddeningly incomplete. 5:32 p.m. Renata enters Dalton's diner. Casimir Dalton, working the counter, notes her arrival. She orders a grilled cheese sandwich and black coffee. The diner has 4 other patrons, a married couple, Harold and Edith Brennan, ages 67 and 64, seated at the counter, as a young man later identified as 19-year-old Jerome Watkins, eating a plate of fries in the back booth, and a regular named Marty Sikorsky, age 44, a postal carrier reading the Sun-Times at the booth nearest the door. 5:48 p.m. Renata's food arrives. She eats while writing in her notebook. Casimir Dalton refills her coffee once. At approximately 6:50 p.m., 7:12 p.m., Renata closes her notebook and begins packing her messenger bag. Martin Sikorsky, preparing to leave, holds the door for her. He later told police, "I said something like, 'Bundle up, it's bitter out there.' She laughed and said, 'I'm Polish, Marty. Cold is in my blood.' That's the last thing I heard her say." 7:15 p.m. Renata exits Dalton's diner, turns left, and begins walking south on Kedzie Avenue. Martin Sikorsky turns right toward his car and does not see which direction she goes after the first half block. This is the last confirmed sighting of Renata Kowalski. To 7:22 p.m. A resident of 6480 South Kedzie Avenue, 56-year-old widow Gertrude Trudy Pashik, later reported hearing what she described as a short scream, or maybe a shout, while watching television in her front room. She muted the TV and looked out the window, but saw only empty sidewalk and blowing snow. She did not call the police. "I figured someone slipped on the ice," she told investigators. "People were always slipping that winter." 7:23 p.m. to 8 p.m. No sightings. No witnesses. 37 minutes in which Renata Kowalski vanished from the fabric of the living world as completely as if the snow had swallowed her whole. At 11:58 p.m., Linda Jansen called the Kowalski residence on Keeler Avenue. Dottie Kowalski answered on the second ring, already awake, already worried. A mother's radar, she would later say, had been pinging since sundown. Linda explained that Renata hadn't come home, wasn't answering at any of the places she usually went, and hadn't called. Lestan Kowalski drove to the 8th District Station at 1:20 a.m. on November 20th. Officer Patricia Pat Callahan, badge number 142227, took the missing persons report. Renata was 23 years old, legally an adult. There were no signs of foul play. Department policy at the time required a 48-hour waiting period before active investigation. Stan Kowalski did not wait 48 hours. By 6 a.m. Sunday, he and Tommy were walking the route between Dalton's diner and Renata's apartment, or knocking on every door, checking every gangway and alley. At 9:14 a.m., in the narrow gangway between 6480 and 6484 South Kedzie Avenue, directly adjacent to Trudy Pashik's building, Tommy Kowalski found his sister's tan canvas messenger bag lying behind a row of garbage cans. The brass Eiffel Tower keychain was still attached. Inside were her textbooks, her notebook, and her wallet. The $14 was still there. Her keys were missing. Stan called the police from Trudy Pashik's telephone at 9:22 a.m. This time, there was no waiting period. The 1st Patrol Unit, officers Daniel Reyes and Karen Wojciechowski of the 8th District, arrived at 9:38 a.m. Detective Sergeant Frank Lucarelli of the Area 5 Violent Crimes Division was on scene by 10:15 a.m. The Cook County Crime Lab mobile unit arrived at 11 a.m. By noon, the gangway between 6480 and 6,484 South Kedzie had been cordoned off with yellow tape. And forensic technicians were photographing and cataloguing every item within a 30-foot radius. The evidence was sparse but suggestive. The messenger bag showed no signs of damage, but had been found approximately 40 feet from the sidewalk, deep in the gangway. A partial shoe print in the thin snow near the bag was photographed, but was too degraded by melt and foot traffic to yield a usable cast. Crime lab technician Ronald Vesley, badge number T0381, he'd collected 3 cigarette butts from the gangway floor, 2 Marlboro Reds and 1 Pall Mall, and logged them as evidence items E-1983-4701, E-1983-4702, and E-1983-4703, respectively. A single brown leather glove, women's size small, was recovered from beneath a garbage can and tagged as E-1983-4704. Dottie Kowalski confirmed the glove belonged to Renata. There was no blood, no weapon, no body, no indication of where Renata had gone after someone or something pulled her into that gangway. The family notification had, in a sense, already occurred. The Kowalskis had been living inside the nightmare since midnight. But the formal moment came at 2 p.m. on November 20th, when Detective Sergeant Lucarelli sat across from Stan and Dottie in their living room on Keeler Avenue, beneath a framed portrait of Pope John Paul II, and said the words that would define the next 38 years of their lives. "We are treating your daughter's disappearance as a probable abduction." Dottie Kowalski made the sign of the cross. Stan said nothing. He was looking at the doorway to the kitchen, where Renata's clarinet case still sat on top of the refrigerator, waiting for her to come home and play it badly. Detective Sergeant Frank Lucarelli was 46 years old in November 1983. A barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper mustache, bifocals he was perpetually losing, and 22 years on the Chicago Police Department. Born and raised in Bridgeport, the son of a steelworker, he'd walked a beat in Englewood before making detective in 1970. He had a reputation for 2 things: relentless thoroughness and a volcanic temper directed exclusively at bureaucratic obstruction. He drank too much coffee, slept too little, and kept a framed photograph of every unsolved victim on a corkboard above his desk that he called the wall. By 1983, there were 11 faces on that wall. Renata Kowalski would become the 12th. The search for Renata began in earnest on November 20th and expanded over the following 10 days. Lucarelli coordinated with the Chicago Police Department's 8th District, the Cook County Sheriff's Office, the Illinois State Police, and, when the case crossed the 2-week mark without resolution, the FBI's Chicago Field Office, which assigned Special Agent Douglas Merritt to monitor developments. In total, the search involved 347 volunteer searchers organized through St. Nicholas of Tollentine Parish, 28 sworn officers, 4 K-9 units from CPD, and the Cook County Sheriff, a helicopter from the Illinois State Police Aviation Division, and a dive team from the Chicago Fire Department that searched the retention ponds in Marquette Park on November 28th and 29th. Over the first 2 weeks, searchers logged approximately 6,200 hours across an area of roughly 14 square miles encompassing Chicago Lawn, Marquette Park, West Lawn, and portions of Gage Park. They checked abandoned buildings, rail yards, dumpsters, sewer access points, and the crawl spaces of every building within a 4-block radius of the gangway where the messenger bag was found. They found nothing. Lucarelli turned to the evidence. The 3 cigarette butts, E-1983-4701 through 4703, were sent to the Illinois State Police Forensic Science Laboratory in Springfield for analysis. In 1983, DNA profiling was not yet available to American law enforcement. The best the lab could offer was blood typing from saliva residue. Lab director Dr. Elaine Schrader reported on December 14, 1983, that the 2 Marlboro red butts showed type A saliva and the Pall Mall showed type O. Renata Kowalski was type B. The butts had been smoked by at least 2 individuals, neither of whom was Renata. The partial shoe print yielded no usable information. The messenger bag and glove were dusted for fingerprints. 17 latent prints were recovered, 14 of which matched Renata. The remaining 3 were partial and inconclusive. The witness interviews consumed hundreds of hours. Martin Sikorsky, the postal carrier, was interviewed 4 times and gave a consistent account each time. He could not recall any vehicles idling on the block or any person following Renata. Jerome Watkins, the 19-year-old in the back booth, told police he had not been paying attention and left the diner 5 minutes after Renata. He was cleared after his mother confirmed he arrived home at 3712 West 64th Place by 7:30 p.m. Harold and Edith Brennan left the diner at approximately 6:40 p.m. and saw nothing unusual. Trudy Pashek, the woman who heard the scream, was interviewed 7 times and could add nothing beyond her initial account. The investigation generated 3 primary suspects. Suspect 1, Dennis Ray Hobart, age 38, a mechanic at Ray's Auto Body at 6301 South Pulaski Road. Hobart had been convicted in 1974 of aggravated battery against an ex-girlfriend and served 18 months at Stateville Correctional Center. He lived alone at 6440 South Kedzie Avenue, 4 doors from the gangway where the messenger bag was found. He drove a 1978 Ford Econoline van, dark green, license plate IL-AH4429. He had no alibi for the evening of November 19th, claiming he was home watching television. Detectives searched his apartment and van on November 24th with his consent. Nothing linking him to Renata was found. He submitted to a polygraph on December 1st. Results were inconclusive. Hobart remained a person of interest but was never charged. Suspect 2. Craig Allen Dvorak, age 27, a part-time janitor at Marquette Park Fieldhouse, a known petty offender with arrest for public intoxication and indecent exposure. 1981, charges dropped. Dvorak was seen by a neighbor, 43-year-old bus driver Lenny Grabowski, walking on Kedzie Avenue around 7 p.m. on November 19th. Dvorak claimed he was walking to his sister's house at 6521 South Kedzie Avenue, which his sister, Diane Dvorak Novak, age 30, confirmed. He submitted to a polygraph on December 5th. Results indicated deception on 2 questions. However, without physical evidence or witnesses placing him with Renata, charges could not be sustained. Dvorak died of liver failure in 1997 at age 41. Suspect 3, Richard Wayne Olmsted, was age 45, a long-haul truck driver for Consolidated Freight Lines who maintained a rented room at 6455 South Kedzie Avenue when he was in Chicago. Olmsted was flagged because he had been questioned in connection with an unsolved sexual assault in Joliet, Illinois, in 1979. His logbooks indicated he was in Chicago on November 19, 1983, but had departed for a delivery to Indianapolis on November 20th at 3 a.m. His room was searched on November 29th, with a warrant obtained by Assistant State's Attorney Margaret Pegg Hannigan. Nothing of evidentiary value was recovered. Olmsted passed a polygraph on December 12th. He was cleared as a suspect, though Lucarelli privately noted in his case file, "Olmsted is too calm. Something about this man stays with me." By March 1984, the investigation had stalled. The search had been called off. The volunteers had gone home, while the FBI reduced its monitoring to quarterly status checks. Lucarelli, in a department memo dated March 15, 1984, wrote, "All viable leads have been exhausted. Evidence is insufficient to support charges against any identified suspect. This case is being reclassified to inactive/cold status pending development of new information. The case file, 4 bankers' boxes, approximately 2,300 pages of reports, photographs, and evidence logs, was transferred to the Cook County Archive facility on South Pulaski Road. Renata's face was added to Frank Lucarelli's wall. 1984, bled into 1985, and then into 1990, and then into the new millennium, and Renata Kowalski remained missing. The absence became a permanent architecture in the lives of those who loved her. Not a wound that healed, but a room that was always there. Door always ajar. Cold air always seeping through. Stan Kowalski retired from Western Electric in 1986 when the Hawthorne Works closed permanently. He spent his remaining years as a crossing guard at St. Nicholas of Tollentine School, where he could see the corner of Kedzie Avenue from his post. He never said it aloud, but Dottie knew. He was watching for Renata. He died of a heart attack on September 3, 1998, at age 66. At his funeral, Tommy Kowalski told a church full of mourners that his father had never once stopped looking. Dottie Kowalski channeled her grief into advocacy. In 1987, she helped establish the Illinois Missing Persons Clearinghouse, lobbying state legislators alongside other families of the missing. She kept Renata's bedroom in the bungalow on Keeler Avenue exactly as it had been in November 1983. The postcards on the sloped ceiling yellowed. The clarinet case gathered dust. Once a year on Renata's birthday, Dottie placed a fresh bouquet of sunflowers, Renata's favorite, on the kitchen table. She was still doing this in 2019, at age 84, when a detective she had never met called her telephone and said the words she had rehearsed hearing for 36 years. The case was reviewed 3 times during the cold years. In 1991, CPD's newly formed cold case unit assigned Detective Maria Garza to conduct a preliminary review. She recommended re-interviewing Dennis Hobart, who refused to cooperate. In 2003, the case was briefly reopened when a construction crew excavating a vacant lot at 6500 South Kedzie Avenue discovered human remains. They turned out to be those of a male, approximately 60 years old, later identified as a homeless man named Arthur Poole, who had died of natural causes in the late 1970s. In 2011, a tip line call led investigators to a storage unit in Cicero that contained women's clothing from the 1980s. The items did not match Renata's description, and the unit's renter, a 70-year-old retired schoolteacher named Phyllis Kearney, explained she was a vintage clothing collector. Frank Lucarelli retired from the Chicago Police Department in 1995 with the rank of lieutenant. He took the wall with him. Renata's photograph hung in his home office in Oak Lawn until his death from cancer in 2012 at age 75. His widow, Anita Lucarelli, returned the case files he had kept personal copies of to the CPD Cold Case Unit in 2013. Among them was a handwritten note, undated, in Lucarelli's cramped script, the cigarette butts. Somebody was waiting in that gangway. Somebody who smoked Pall Malls. The technology to follow that thread did not exist in 1983, but by 2019, it did. Detective Angela Tran was 34 years old when she was assigned to the Cook County Cold Case Task Force in January 2018. The daughter of Vietnamese refugees who had settled in Uptown, she had earned her badge in 2010 after graduating from John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. She was meticulous, digitally fluent, and possessed of a quiet intensity that her colleagues sometimes mistook for aloofness. She was not aloof. She was listening. In February 2019, Tran was reviewing cases eligible for forensic genetic genealogy testing, a technique that had exploded into public awareness with the arrest of the Golden State Killer in April 2018. So she pulled the Kowalski file from the archive. 4 banker's boxes, 2,300 pages. She read every one. And then she found the note. Lucarelli's note. The cigarette butts. Somebody was waiting in that gangway. Somebody who smoked Pall Malls. Tran requested the original evidence from the Cook County Evidence Warehouse. On March 3, 2019, she signed out items E-1983-4701 through E-1983-4704. The evidence bags were intact, the chain of custody unbroken. And she submitted the Pall Mall cigarette butt, E-1983-4703, the one that had shown typo saliva in 1983, to Bode Technology in Lawton, Virginia, one of the nation's leading forensic DNA laboratories for advanced touch DNA extraction and STR profiling. On April 22, 2019, Bode Technology reported success. Despite the degradation of 35 years, the lab had extracted a viable male DNA profile from the Pall Mall butts filter. The profile was uploaded to the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, and searched against the national database. No direct match was returned. Tran did not stop. She authorized the profile to be submitted to Parabon Nanolabs in Reston, Virginia, for genetic genealogy analysis through the GEDmatch public database. On June 14, 2019, Parabon's lead genealogist, Dr. Catherine Almquist, I reported that the DNA profile showed strong familial matches to a cluster of individuals descended from a Bohemian Czech immigrant family that had settled in the Berwyn-Cicero area of suburban Chicago in the early 1900s. The surname was Sedlacek. Tran and genealogist Almquist began building a reverse family tree. Over the following 4 months, they traced the Sedlacek lineage through census records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and obituaries held at the Cook County Clerk's office and the National Archives Great Lakes facility in Chicago. The tree branched and narrowed. By October 2019, Tran had identified a single living male who matched the predicted age, geographic proximity, and Y chromosome haplogroup, a man named Gerald Jerry Pavel Sedlacek, born August 11, 1949, in Berwyn, Illinois. And when Tran pulled Gerald Sedlacek's criminal record, the room tilted. The Sedlacek had been arrested in 1977 for attempted kidnapping in Brookfield, Illinois. The victim, a 20-year-old nursing student named Carol Mays, had escaped when a passing motorist honked his horn. Sedlacek pleaded to a reduced charge of unlawful restraint, served 8 months in the Cook County Jail, and was released in June 1978. He moved to the 6,400 block of South Kedzie Avenue in Chicago Lawn in 1980. He had lived 3 doors from the gangway where Renata Kowalski's messenger bag was found. On November 2, 2019, Tran obtained a covert DNA sample, a discarded coffee cup from a fast food restaurant in Tinley Park, where Sedlacek now lived at 17,203 Oak Park Avenue. The sample was expedited to Bode Technology. On November 18, 2019, 1 day before the 36th anniversary of Renata's disappearance, the lab confirmed. The DNA from the coffee cup matched the DNA on the Pall Mall cigarette butt recovered from the gangway at 6,480 South Kedzie Avenue in 1983. The man who had been waiting in that gangway on a freezing November night, smoking a Pall Mall cigarette, was Gerald Sedlacek. On December 4, 2019, at 6:12 a.m., Detective Angela Tran, accompanied by 6 members of the Cook County Sheriff's Special Operations Unit, arrested Gerald Pavel Sedlacek at his residence at 17,203 Oak Park Avenue, Tinley Park, Illinois. He was 70 years old, white-haired, stooped, and living alone in a one-story ranch house with vinyl siding and a chain-link fence. He answered the door in a bathrobe. He did not resist. He did not speak. He was transported to the Cook County Criminal Courts building at 2650 South California Avenue and charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated kidnapping. Under interrogation, conducted by Tran and Cook County Assistant State's Attorney Ruben Salazar, Sedlacek initially denied any knowledge of Renata Kowalski. When presented with the DNA evidence, he asked for an attorney. Court-appointed defense attorney Lawrence Larry Buchek of the Cook County Public Defender's Office was assigned the case. What followed was not a confession, but a collapse. On January 14, 2020, during a pre-trial meeting with his attorney, Sedlacek began speaking and did not stop for 3 hours. The account was recorded with his consent and entered into evidence. Sedlacek told investigators that on the evening of November 19, 1983, he had been standing in the gangway between 6480 and 6484 South Kedzie Avenue, smoking, watching the sidewalk. He had been doing this for weeks, watching women walk past, selecting targets, building fantasies. He had fixated on Renata, whom he had observed multiple times walking between the diner and her apartment. When she passed the gangway that evening, he grabbed her from behind, dragged her into the narrow space between the buildings, and struck her head against the brick wall. She lost consciousness. He carried her to his car, a 1976 Chevrolet Impala, dark brown, parked in the alley behind his apartment at 6446 South Kedzie. He drove her to a rural area south of Kankakee, Illinois, approximately 70 miles from Chicago, where he killed her by manual strangulation and buried her body in a wooded area near the Kankakee River, off County Road 3000 South. On January 27, 2020, a search team from the Illinois State Police, guided by Sedlacek's directions, recovered skeletal remains from a shallow grave approximately 200 yards east of the Kankakee River, near the intersection of County Roads 3000 South and 5000 West in Kankakee County. The forensic anthropologist Dr. Sarah Lindquist of the University of Illinois confirmed the remains were those of a female, approximately 20 to 25 years of age at time of death. DNA extracted from a molar matched Renata Marie Kowalski's familial DNA profile obtained from Dottie Kowalski. Renata had been found 36 years, 2 months, and 8 days after she walked out of Dalton's diner into the snow. Gerald Sedlacek was tried in Cook County Circuit Court before Judge Patricia Patty Callahan, no relation to the officer who had taken the original missing persons report. Prosecutor Ruben Salazar presented the DNA evidence, the confession, and the recovery of the remains. Defense attorney Larry Buchek argued diminished capacity, citing Sedlacek's history of untreated psychiatric illness. On September 12, 2020, the jury returned a guilty verdict on both counts after 4 hours of deliberation. On October 30, 2020, Judge Callahan sentenced Gerald Pavold Sedlacek to natural life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom gallery, Dottie Kowalski sat in the front row, flanked by Tommy, Anna, and Cassia. She was 85 years old. She wore a sunflower pin on her lapel. When the verdict was read, she closed her eyes and held her son's hand. She did not cry. She had done her crying. Outside the courtroom, Tommy Kowalski addressed reporters. His voice was steady, then his eyes wet. "My father died looking for her," he said. "My mother never stopped fighting. Renata deserved to come home, and today she did." Detective Angela Tran, standing at the back of the hallway, said nothing to the press. She returned to her office, sat at her desk, and opened the next cold case file. Justice is not a clock. It does not keep time the way we wish it would. It arrives late or sideways, or in forms we barely recognize. For the Kowalski family, its justice came wrapped in grief. The answer they had begged for delivered alongside the confirmation of the loss they had never stopped carrying. It is a bitter arithmetic, but it is not nothing. It is, in fact, everything. Renata Marie Kowalski was a woman who asked a diner owner about his knee. She was a woman who played the clarinet badly because she loved the sound. She was a woman who papered her ceiling with postcards from places she intended to go. She was 23 years old, and she was just beginning. Her life was stolen from her in a gangway on a frozen Chicago night by a man who saw her not as a person, but as an object of predation. She deserved better. She deserved the world she was trying to build. A world where kids in detention centers had someone who listened, where broken things could be mended, where hope was not naive, but necessary. Modern forensic science, DNA profiling, genetic genealogy, yet the patient work of genealogists and detectives who refused to let time erase accountability, gave Renata's family the truth. It cannot give them Renata back, but it gave them an ending, and endings matter, even painful ones. Especially painful ones. To every family still waiting, still looking, still leaving porch lights on, science is catching up. Time does not protect the guilty the way it once did. The evidence holds. The truth endures. And there are people like Angela Tran and Frank Lucarelli, and like Dottie Kowalski, who will not stop. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to stay with us for our next case.